I believe an underrated quality of what made Nick Saban the greatest coach in the history of college football was his ability to be a national championship contender with damn near any quarterback that he started. And that's what motivated me to do this segment, ranking every starting quarterback from the Nick Saban era at Alabama. Now, I'm only doing the quarterbacks that started more than one game. So if you didn't start the entirety of the regular season, you didn't make this list. And we're going to start off at number 10 with John Parker Wilson. This was the first quarterback that Nick Saban inherited when he first arrived on the scene at Tuscaloosa, and he wasn't that good. And in spite of him only throwing 12 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, the team pretty much won in spite of him. They went 12-2 in Nick Saban's second season. Now, John Parker Wilson, he played in a different era of college football during that time where the ground game was more important than your ability to throw the football. But with how dominant Alabama's rushing attack was, they didn't really need John Parker Wilson to be that good. They just needed him to be a really good game manager, but he wasn't really that great at that. So that's why he ends up coming in at number 10. Number 9, Jake Coker. How many of you guys remember this dude? Because I almost forgot about him. He transferred from Florida State. He was a pretty solid game manager. I feel his best football came the final 3 weeks of the season for Bama. He was really good in the SEC championship. He was dominant during their run in the college football playoffs. And ultimately, he was good enough to where he helped lead Alabama to that national championship when they took down Clemson. They finished 14-1. The only reason he's not higher is due to, when he was asked to have to carry the team on his shoulders, when they asked him to throw the football a lot against Ole Miss, he completed 46% of his passes. He had 2 interceptions and 3 touchdowns in that game. He wasn't really one of those quarterbacks that you asked to put the team on your back and will us to a win. He was just good at managing the game, minimizing mistakes, and handing that football off to Derrick Henry. So he comes in at number 9. At number 8, we got Jaylen Herz. Jaylen Herz has had a lot of success in the NFL, but when he played at Alabama, I didn't think he would ever turn into the player that he currently is with the Philadelphia Eagles right now. But he did have a lot of success despite him getting replaced by Tua in the national championship against Georgia. We all know the story. At halftime, Nick Saban makes the bold move to bench Jaylen Herz, who at that point was the most winningest quarterback in college football. Jaylen finished with a 26-2 record as the starter. But what hurt Jaylen throughout his time starting at Bama was ultimately why he ended up getting benched in that national championship. He wasn't really a good passer, but he was an incredible runner of the football. He was the equivalent of having a running back at quarterback. He had great vision, but he had this rare blend of speed and power. We already know the dude can power lift or power squat 500 and freaking pounds. He's a fucking tank in the open field at quarterback. But what hurts him is just how inconsistent he was throwing the football. But he came in at a time when Alabama needed stable quarterback play. Remember, during his true freshman season, he replaced Blake Barnett in that week 1 game against USC. He ended up finishing his true freshman career, his true freshman campaign, winning SEC Offensive Player of the Year. He scored 36 total touchdowns, but his inability to be an efficient passer hurt Bama. And his only 2 losses, somewhat came in the games where he just stunk it up throwing the ball, and it was a huge reason why Bama lost in the Natty in 2016 to Clemson. Jaylen Murro, I have him at number 7. This is probably going to be the most polarizing one of all of these guys that I have ranked on here. Due to Jaylen Murro, you can say, okay, JT, if you got Jaylen Herz at 8 due to his inability to throw the football consistently despite his 26-2 record, why is Jaylen Murro above him? Jaylen Murro was a much better passer and the long season that he started for Nick Saban than what Jaylen Herz was. Although Jaylen Murro definitely had his fair share of clunkers out there, at least he was a lot better at throwing the football downfield. Remember when he had the prayer and Jordan Hare to Isaiah Baum on that 4th down? Like, at that point, you would have thought the game was already over. Jaylen Murro throws that motherfucker up. Isaiah Baum comes down with it. It was one of the best plays of the Nick Saban dynasty at Bama, because it's a play that a lot of us are always going to remember. But in terms of just talent and athleticism, Jaylen Murro was Nick Saban's most freakishly gifted quarterback. He scored 35 touchdowns in 2023, 23 through the air, 15 on the ground. He led Bama to somewhat of an upset win over Georgia, and he improved dramatically throughout the course of the season. He was a way better quarterback at the end of 2023 than what he was when he first was a starter at the beginning of the season. Blake Sims comes in at number 6, and he was the quarterback that I kind of was a fan favorite of growing up watching Bama. He was a pretty good athlete, not that athlete that Jaylen Herz and Jaylen Murro was, but he gave you a little bit on the ground. He also was a capable passer, which is why I have him over both Murro and Hertz, because although he wasn't that good at throwing the football in his own right, at least he was serviceable. Blake Sims' issue is that he was extremely volatile. Like in that shootout win that they had in the Iron Bowl in 2014, he had 4 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions. And his volatility costed Bama in the opening round of the CFP when he went against Ohio State, because he threw 3 picks in that game. But when he was on and he was playing his best football, he was lights out. He completed 85% of his passes against Missouri to win the SEC championship, along with 2 touchdowns. So when Blake Sims was taking care of the football and he wasn't imploding, he was really underrated during his low season starting for Alabama. And he was one of my favorite quarterbacks of the Nick Saban Alabama era. Greg McElroy, the ESPN analyst, who is one of my favorites to listen to. I love his podcast as well. I got him at number 5. And I feel Greg McElroy doesn't really get the respect he deserves. Some folks may have him a lot lower on this list, but he went 23-3 as a starter. Most of those losses occurred during his final season, and he was a really good game manager for Alabama. He wasn't lighting the world on fire, but in his 2 years starting for Saban, he had 37 touchdowns and only 9 interceptions, and he was incredibly underrated to me, because he was a really good game manager due to his consistency. He never played bad enough to where you could just solely point the finger at him for being the reason why Alabama lost the game. And he helped deliver Nick Saban his first natty at Alabama, although he didn't really do much in it due to Colt McCoy going down with an injury early in that game. The defense was just obliterating the backup quarterback that Texas had in, plus Trent Richardson, Mark Ingram were going crazy in that game as well. But when Greg McElroy had to step up and make big throws for Bama, he pretty much delivered the majority of times. And I just feel with how he gets viewed as an analyst, sometimes people kind of forget just how good Greg McElroy was due to, how early during Nick Saban's tenure he played and there being more talented quarterbacks than him. But from a consistency and execution standpoint, he was one of the best, most reliable quarterbacks that Nick Saban had at Alabama. Mac Jones, mac and cheese. I got him at number 4. He only started for 1 season at Alabama. Although you probably could say that, he started more because he technically started a half a season the year prior to 2020 with the injury to Tua. But at the time when Mac Jones took over, he had the most prolific season in the history of Alabama football for a quarterback. He broke their completion percentage record, which he broke the NCAA's all-time completion percentage record for completion percentage in the season at 77.4, and then Bo Nix eventually went on a few years later to tie with that. But he was a Heisman finalist. He won the Davey O'Brien Award. And it just, every time the ball came out of Mac Jones' hands, it was pinpoint accurate. And him and Devontae Smith were absolutely carving up defenses. You had Steve Sarkisian dialing up the plays. Mac Jones wasn't that mobile. He wasn't really that impressive to look at physically. But the dude had some of the best accuracy that I've ever seen out of a college football quarterback. It's like he 1, 2, 3 drop back. Oof, that thing is right on the money to every receiver he was throwing the football to. He also was only the second quarterback during the Saban Bama era to go a perfect 13-0 and win a national championship. Mac Jones, despite only playing one season for Saban, he definitely made his mark that lone year in 2020, and he is the prime example why a lot of these new age quarterbacks in college football are making a mistake when they just hop in the portal the moment they don't start right away. He waited his turn. He sat behind Jaylen. He sat behind Tua. And eventually when he took over the reins, you know, he ended up having such a good season, mainly due to him being able to sit back and learn. A.J. McCarron, I have him at number 3. When I think of the pinnacle of the Alabama dynasty, A.J. McCarron is the first quarterback that comes in the forefront of my memory, because he's the only quarterback out of everyone that Nick Saban has coached down in Tuscaloosa that led him to 2 national championships. They went back-to-back, 2011, 2012, when they just slaughtered Notre Dame. And A.J. McCarron, at one point when he first took over as Alabama starter, he was a game manager. But then over the course of his career, his second and third seasons as a starter, he elevated from game manager to a prolific quarterback. He had 30 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in 2012. He also was a Heisman runner-up. He was a Maxwell Award winner in 2013. A.J. McCarron is the most accomplished quarterback of the Saban-Bama era, because it's like every time he was in a big game, he always delivered. There weren't too many games where A.J. McCarron didn't really play that well his final 2 years as a starter. His first year, it more so was a run-heavy approach, but A.J. McCarron kind of started to change Nick Saban's philosophy when it came to how much he threw the football, in a sense. If he had a quarterback that he actually could trust to sling that thing around, he would let him sling it around. They had always some of the best receivers in the sport. So A.J. McCarron, he's just one of the more memorable quarterbacks of Saban's time in Alabama that I always remember. When I first really got deep into college football, when I really started to fall in love with this sport, it's when A.J. McCarron was the quarterback. And I always questioned why he didn't get more opportunities as a starter in the NFL. Number 2, I have Tua Tagovailoa. When he took over for Jaylen Herz in the national championship and led them to that comeback in that game against Georgia, you knew Alabama had something special. And Tua was the best pure passer of the Nick Saban Bama era. This is a guy who completed 16.2, or he had 16.2 yards per completion. And the following season, after 2018 and 2019, he completed 15.8 yards per pass. That is incredible for a team at one point before Tua took over was more so all about running the football, smash mouth mentality. Tua kind of started to speed up that transition of Alabama going from being an old school pro style offense to having more of a spread oriented attack. We're just going to sling the football all over the field against you. With how accurate, I know I say Mac Jones was accurate, but Tua just threw the ball with so much poise and so much great anticipation. And if he never would have got injured during his final season, I believe he most definitely would have ended up winning the Heisman Trophy, because the numbers that he put up during his final season, 33 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, he was on pace to put up better numbers than his first season being the starter at Alabama. He had crazy efficiency for the high amount of volume that Alabama threw the football with. And that's really what started Nick Saban to become more so quarterback centric. And listen, he had one of the biggest memories that I will ever recall as a college football fan. That game-winning touchdown that he threw to the left sideline of the end zone to Devontae Smith. I'll never forget that play, man. The look on Kirby Smart's face, how defeated he looked in that game. He was like, damn it. Just damn it. I almost had you, Nick. I almost had you. Tua, with the injuries, is what kept him from being the greatest quarterback in Alabama history. You guys know who's at number one. Bryce Young is, to me, the best quarterback that I've ever watched in the history of college football. And it's unfortunate that he never won a national championship as a starter at Alabama. But when you watched Bryce Young play, there was just something mystical about him. He just had a different aura around him. No matter how bleak things used to look for Alabama, anytime the game was on the line and you put the ball in Bryce Young's hands, he always came through. I remember that comeback that he had late in the fourth quarter against Texas, that game-winning drive that he had against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Bryce Young just had ice in his veins. He was a computer at the quarterback position. He wasn't the most physically imposing, the most physically gifted, but he had a prolific career at Alabama. He had ice in his veins, and statistically, he's the best quarterback in the history of this program. In 2021, he shattered all of Mac Jones' records for passing yards, touchdowns. He won the Heisman Trophy. Like, Bryce Young carried Alabama the 2 years he was a starter. And normally, you don't say a quarterback carried Alabama because of the talent that they always have. But no, this 5'9", 5'10", soaking wet midget carried Alabama on his back for the 2 years that he was a starter. And even Nick Saban said that after Bryce Young left for the NFL, he said that we were too Bryce Young dependent. That told you everything that you needed to know about how special Bryce Young was for Nick Saban. And I thought that they would have beaten Georgia that year. That was as down and out as an Alabama squad as you ever would have seen the 2 years Bryce Young was there. But with the level of confidence and poise he just had in late game situations, I had to put him number one on this list. There was just something magical about watching Mr. Houdini back there at QB, man. He just was damn near unstoppable. And the only time Bryce Young lost at Alabama was when he didn't have a chance to win the game. Either Alabama got stomped, or remember when they lost to Tennessee and LSU, Bryce Young's final season? That was because Tennessee and LSU had the ball in their hands, and Alabama's defense was unable to get the ball back in Bryce Young's hands. That's why I say the only time Bryce Young lost is when he didn't have an opportunity to win it. Because if he did, he turned into the midget version of Tom Brady in college football, man. Bryce Young is my favorite quarterback of Nick Saban's role gatherer quarterbacks during his time at Alabama. And these are my rankings of every quarterback that started for Nick Saban during his time coaching this program. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. And this is it for this episode. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys shortly.